There we are. All right, everybody. Got Zach from National Firearms Coalition. Been trying to get this interview set up for a couple days now. Had to get our schedules to kind of collide. We got Mike Vasquez from No Soundbites Allowed. And we are here to interview Brandon Wilkinson, the Let's Go Brandon congressional candidate from Missouri District 3. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Wilkinson. I'm just a regular working class American. About 12 years ago, I was really involved in politics. I saw the problems in our country, and I just hit my wits' end when I was sitting there with my best friend, drinking a beer and watching Harry Reid on TV lying. And I just looked over at him and I'm like, I'm just done. I'm gonna run for Congress. And he laughed and I laughed. And then I'm like, no, really. And he's like, next election? And I'm like, no, man, I got a lot to learn. And then I spent basically the next decade preparing, studying law, constitution, civics, government, and so on. And that way, I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to need to do when I get there, unlike a lot of people who just jump in feet first and have no preparation. So now here we are.
Awesome. Mike Vasquez, if you just go ahead and introduce yourself for real quick.
Absolutely. For those who aren't familiar, I do No Soundbites Allowed. I've been a political commentator for the last a little over 15 years, and I've been doing interviews with political candidates of every party that's left, right, in between since 2008. So I'll be handling a little bit more of the general issues of Congress, and I know Zach will be handling more of the 2A and gun control issues. Just to let people know, I've also run for Congress myself in 2014, so I am familiar with the process and also many of the questions that should be asked.
Perfect. All right. I will go ahead and get started out real quick with probably the number one question that anybody from NFC would like to hear an answer about. How do you feel about HR 7910 and further pushing of federal regulation on red flag laws?
So I just scratched into 7110 or 7910 a little bit, and it doesn't take much for me when it comes to any gun control. I rarely have to make it past a couple pages before I'm against it. In general, I believe that all gun control is a violation of our Second Amendment right. So I didn't really feel it was necessary to read any further or read much more than I had, because at that point it's just a waste of time. I don't support it, and I never would.
Good answer.
Brandon, now I know that this is not your first time running for office. In fact, you had run in the 2020 cycle, which I know was a difficult cycle for many people due to the pandemic and the limitations at that time. But according to the FEC filings up to date, you had generated $11,200 in debt, and at this time, you've raised $19,700 and I've spent 23.2, which may include 11,000 previous, so about $15,000 in debt. Campaigns are very expensive. Can you tell us how do you look to pay off that debt going forward, and will that influence the way that if you're elected would run as a member of Congress?
Yeah, if I would like to say, 2020, when I launched my campaign, because I am facing an entrenched incumbent who is heavily funded by PACs and corporations. So when I launched, my campaign got delayed by about 5 months because my wife was pregnant and we had complications right before I was about to launch. And basically we had to start going in twice a week to do these scans that you normally only do every 3 weeks. And they told us, be ready any day, because any day we might tell you we have to take the baby. And C-section, be clear, not abortion. Right. And so I was there, and I'm like, my family's more important, so I delayed my campaign. And the thing is, when you go into a race like this against an entrenched incumbent, who has the kind of money he has, realistically, you're going to lose your first race unless you have a ton of money, so you got to be rich, B, an insane social media following with a decent ground game, or C, a insane ground game with a decent social media, because those other two, that's how you can offset the money. And I'm not rich. I didn't have an insane social media following. I did have a strong ground game, but no one knew who I was. So I actually had delayed, and we knew we were going to lose because I didn't have any of those three things. So this was going to be the foundation campaign to build the foundation of support so we could win 2022. Well, then when we, one day we went in and they're like, yep, your baby's got to come right now. So, they had to do a C-section, and he was only 4 pounds, 5 ounces. He was just a little bitty guy. And he had to be in NICU and an incubator for a while. And a little before that, I basically said, it looks like we're just going to have to cancel the campaign this time, and we'll do the foundation campaign in 22. So we finally got to bring a little man home when he was 5 pounds, 5 ounces. And I sat there and had a conversation with my wife, and I was like, I know we only have 5 months left in this in the cycle to the election, but this was always a foundation race. We always knew we'd lose. We might actually be able to build the following we need to offset the money in 2022. So we had a conversation. She's like, yeah, go for it. Well, so we launched, and then of course lockdown. So we had a 5-month campaign. We had 2 months of lockdown. So in reality, a 3-month campaign with no money and in a 5-way race. And one of the candidates, if I recall correctly, had about a 14-month campaign. One had about a 12-month campaign. And then the third challenger, she had a campaign. She basically launched right when I did. And my message was so powerful, and people loved my platform and stances, and that I'm just honest. I will never BS anyone. Ask me a question, and a leading question where I know you want to hear A, and I think the answer is C, I'll look you in the eyes and tell you. And what that did was it created this level of support and trust to where people could trust everything else I say, because I'm willing to tell you I don't agree with you, and that probably means I'm being honest about everything else. So in reality, in a 3-month campaign, I got 50% more vote than the other 3 challengers combined. Now, I wanted to give that out there so people understand. And when I launched, I actually told people, we're not going to win. This is about building a foundation of support. And so we won 2022.
If I might, before you go for it, it should be mentioned that in that race, you did come in second. You did get 14.8% of the vote. And yes, that is correct. You did beat all other challengers combined. So I do want to put that on the record. You are correct in everything you said. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, and then as far as where you'd mentioned the debt. So if you go and look, you'll see the debt is actually from me. So I put money into my campaign. I also lent my campaign money, but I won't pay what I've lent my campaign back from donors. The only way I pay that back is if I win the general, and then all the party money flows in. Then I'll pay it back, or not. I don't know. We'll see when time comes, but I will not pay it back with donor money, period.
Okay. Fair answer. Thank you.
And by the way, I did build the foundation of support we were looking for.
Yes.
We launched this campaign and blew up to where we were hoping that, because it was arcing, right? So as election day came, we were increasing dramatically more and more every day. And we were hoping that when the 2022 campaign came along, that it would pick back up as active as it was. And it turned out that our following was that passionate with us and what we stood for, that when we, being a year and a half later, when we relaunched the campaign end of October 25th, and then I think we got our Facebook active at the beginning of November of 21. Everyone was instantly back active again, and it just continued. So we took off, and we surpassed all these. Well, in the state of Missouri, I had the second largest political following on Facebook, and I'm told I'm roughly in the top 100 to 150 in the nation. And we didn't have to spend the $1 million, or look at Ann Wagner, district next to mine. I think she's running for her 6th term or 7th term. I think it's her 7th. And she's spent over $500,000 on Facebook ads. She has like 9,000 followers, because she doesn't have a powerful message that people just really can get behind, So I want to throw that out there, because though I don't have the money in the incumbent, Facebook is just one metric, but it's a powerful, powerful metric. Just what I reach a week equates to somewhere around $14,000 in free advertising. So that offsets a lot of the incumbent's money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Facebook is a very powerful tool, and to gain such a political following in such a short time is phenomenal. That just kind of shows what type of message you are sending. On to the next question. If you were to be elected as representative for Congressional District 3 of Missouri, how do you propose, or what type of legislation would you propose to make schools safer, to make the community safer, without further infringing on the Second Amendment?
Well, right off the bat, we need to repeal the Gun-Free School Zones Act. It just makes our schools soft targets, and that's ridiculous. I mean, we protect everything in society worth protecting with guns. Our politicians, our banks, our athletes, our musicians, our entertainers, rich business owners. Everyone is protected with guns, but we don't protect the most fragile in our society are children, and I don't like to be conspiratorial here, and I'm not going to play that game where people say, well, if you don't support putting guns in our schools, then you want children to die. I'm not going to play that game. But what I do believe is that politicians, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think there are politicians that won't support it because they want gun control, and the means justifies the ends. All right, they don't protect their offices or themselves or their families with a sign. I think that if there was a standard where whatever the schools have to protect them is what politicians had, I guarantee you the next day they would sign away the Gun-Free Schools Loan Act, and they'd sign something into law that would put armed, whether it be more resource officers, whether it be allowing teachers or requiring every school have X amount of people who are armed. I guarantee they would do that if that was the only way they could have armed protection. So yeah, we need to harden our schools. And there's some I hate to use the word common sense, because some people to the left, common sense is take away your guns, no AR-15s, no high capacity magazines. To me, common sense is looking at the numbers and the statistics and saying what can take care of this? How can we stop this? If I recall correctly, it's 94% of mass shootings take place in gun-free zones. Why? Because if you want to do damage, you want to create the most carnage you can, you're going to go somewhere where people can't fight back. So get rid of gun-free zones. I think there's only a couple places in this nation that should be gun-free zones. I do believe that, like the White House, obviously should be. I think there are a couple places you could pick and choose that should be. And as far as our schools, let's get gun zone, man. And people, the left will say, what, you think that if you arm teachers, you're going to force teachers to carry guns? No, I'm not going to force them. But the ones that want to, well, let's get them trained. Let's get them a gun and let them. Oh, well, you think they're just going to go hunt down? And I'm stating this because they're ones that commonly come around. People say whenever this stuff comes up. Oh, you think a teacher is going to go and hunt down some kid that goes to their school who's shooting up the school? No, I don't believe that the teachers are going to go hunt them down. What I believe is that when that person comes through that teacher's door into their classroom, they will drop them because they love those kids. I know a lot of teachers, they love their students, and they would do anything to protect them. So, harden our schools. And here's a good one. I've talked about this before. John says military veterans to arm our schools across America. I know tons of veterans that would love to go and protect the schools. Tons of them. I'm a big veteran guy, so I know tons of veterans. And there's a bunch of them that are just sitting there retired and bored, would love to go protect the children, their school districts and so on. So harden our schools. Let's looking at Uvalde and some of these other ones, we need to have, secure entry points. When I go to the school right here, the school I live right by, when you go in, you walk in, you can't just get in. There's then a window, and you talk to someone, you give them your ID, slide it under the thing, and I think that's probably bulletproof glass, and then they hit a button, and then you can go in. So create one entry, and, there's a lot of schools that have that kind of thing, and that's not something really expensive to set up. Have an armed resource officer right there. Someone walks in with an AR-15 or something like that, then even if you don't have any more, now he can't get in, and there's a guy with a gun who sees him coming in.
I have firsthand experience with a school district that has done what the left screams calling turning a school into a prison. And I feel great dropping my kids off at that school. Well, it's our daughter's school. Our boys' at school isn't quite so secure, but our daughter's school, they actually have private police. The school actually employs police officers for the school district. And they have arms on the school grounds in locked facilities for the event of, any type of shooting or bombing or anything like that. And they are trained, and some of them are former military, some of them are former police officers. Some of them are off-duty police officers, that volunteer their time. So I can attest that when the left thinks, oh, turn the schools into a prison, it's not like that. Our daughter's school has one point of entry at each building, which is actually a double door airlock setup, just like you had mentioned. Nobody can get in or out without showing ID and being registered that you are related to the student. And then all other exits of the school, your emergency exits and fire exits and such, are one-way doors. They don't have door handles on the outside to open the doors and come in. So I really take appreciation to your standpoint on that, and being somebody that is in a school district where all of those types of security measures are in place. I can assure you that the kids don't feel like it's a prison. If anything, the kids feel safe when they go to school. Um, so it's not a bad thing, and it's not an expensive thing to do. There's plenty of money in there. There's plenty of volunteers that would be happy to volunteer their time to be a school resource officer, whether they're armed or not. Um, so I appreciate you that. I appreciate that. Appreciate your answer to that, and I'll go ahead and let Mike ask his next question.
If I could add one thing to that, it goes with what you were saying. Like if you look, where do school shootings never happen? They never happen in dangerous areas. Like you never hear one happening in St. Louis, which I live 45 minutes to an hour from. Well, why? Because that area is so dangerous. To get in the schools, you got to go through metal detector. You got multiple armed police officers. Because outside is the danger. So you never see them there. You see it in the safer areas. You see it in places like Uvalde, which someone told me that knows about. Apparently, they've been pushing to get armed resource officers there for a while, or armed teacher.
The community. So the community has been one of the ones, and like I said before, I really hope that someday he'll have the heart to actually talk to us. But one of my personal friends lost his 8-year-old son in Uvalde, and he was distraught because he is a member of the local gun organizations that have really been ramping up their community presence in securing schools with armed guards, not necessarily just a resource officer, but actual like armed police officers or a police force. And the biggest upset to that whole incident, in my opinion, and coming from him, and one day I hope he'll actually share his emotion personally, is that the door was propped open. That is a protocol that has been preached to school districts since every single school shooting, all the way back to Columbine and Sandy Hook. Don't leave doors open for people to just run in. So it's a big upset, and the biggest upset for him, and I'll share kind of what his emotion on this was. He was more upset that Beto O'Rourke and his film crew came to his door the very second day after the shooting, asking for interviews and if they could record his son's bedroom and blah, 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 blah. Immediately turning it into a political weapon. So it's disgraceful. And you said it already 10 minutes ago in this broadcast. The left's biggest motto is to never let a good crisis go to waste. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, that is disgusting. I don't know and I can't verify, but if that is correct, someone's using a child's death and memories of that child. That's always disgusting, and we denounce that strongly. Let me ask you a question. Now, on June 3rd, you appeared on the radio show WKOS in your region. And this is June 3rd of 2022, to be exact. At that time, you had made a suggestion that elected leaders should cut the federal gas tax to help offset the increase in energy costs, and in particular gasoline, for American citizens and also for businesses like truckers who use diesel, which is extremely high and is affecting cost of goods. Since that time, we see that Joe Biden has in fact cut the gas tax, the federal gas tax, which amounts to about 18 cents or at current levels, 3.6% in Missouri. Let me ask you, since hopefully they were listening to you and others who have made this suggestion, and specifically yourself since you made it on June 3rd, what other suggestions would you make to the federal government and or your local state government to improve energy costs for everyone in the state of Missouri and of course for the nation?
Right off the bat, I'd say drop the rhetoric towards oil companies. People say that the president doesn't affect gas prices. Well, yes, he absolutely does. Right off the bat, if you have someone who's adversarial towards oil companies and so on. If you're an oil company, are you going to invest whenever you have a president who said, I promise you, we are going to end oil? He said that. That is on video. Or no, he said, I guarantee you, we are going to put an end to oil. If you're in the oil industry, are you going to invest more money? Are you going to expand? Are you going to work on new projects? No. So first, we needed to, all these leases that have expired and he refuses to issue the permits on, issue them. Change what you're saying. First, we're importing, we lost our energy independence. We're importing oil from overseas. That is far worse for the environment than doing it here, okay? Because one, we have much higher standards and regulations when extracting oil from the ground, right? Whereas these other countries don't. So they're polluting way more to produce the same. Then you have to transport it. So now you're putting out all these carbon emissions from running across in a tanker across the seas. So it's actually far worse for our environment. So if you really care about the environment and you're wanting to make an impact there, then why are we eliminating our energy independence and our production and our jobs to give jobs to our enemies and to our other countries, which are polluting far worse, doing far more damage to this world? So start all these leases, renew them, sign them, release the permits, give them an incentive, tell them, put it on paper, put it in the contracts that we're not going to take away your permit. We're not going to revoke it. We're not going to do this. We realize our mistakes. Let's produce. Let's get back to this energy independence. And further, as far as the gas tax, I did. So I guess, hey, they're listening to me, right? I think I was probably one of the first to say that. And I know well, that's not much, but the thing is, it's better than nothing, isn't it? That's 3% the cost right there. So I think that states could also suspend their gas tax. That's going to have another impact. And I know people say, well, then where are they going to get their money? They're going to cut. Well, you know what? You cut the spending. Just like as Americans, we're tightening our belts, right? Well, the government needs to tighten its belt too. As far as those oil leases go and stuff, there's more there. The Biden administration, they lie a lot and then they tell half truths. Like they recently said, if I recall correctly, he said that we've actually issued more permits in 2021 than Trump did in 2020, which is true, but it's a lie because the permits they issued were actually due to the leases they signed under Trump. So the permits that Biden was issuing up until August were actually ones he had to issue because it was contracted. Those leases were signed under Trump. Those were Trump's deals. Those were Trump's permits. It's just Biden was issuing.
Let me clarify one thing you said in that, just so as a point of reference for the public, it is correct that the leases in 2021 up until August of 2021 were carryover leases from the prior administration, the Trump administration. And then in August of 2021, the Biden policies kicked in, which stopped leases to oil and gas companies. I just wanted to put in a frame of reference so people can fact check that and double check because you hadn't mentioned which year. So I do thank you for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then if you look at once the Biden policies came into effect, you notice those leases, they were climbing because they were Trump leases. August hit, and then you look at September, boom, number crashed. Why? Because Biden is not, or they like to twist, and you guys know this, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching know this, that they like to twist and misconstrue, tell half-truths or cherry pick a piece to push and blame it on someone else. And Biden's really good at that. But the reality is he's letting all these leases expire. He's refusing to issue permits. So our production is dropping dramatically. Shutting down Keystone XL pipeline. And to be clear, that actually was not for the oil that would be used for is not actually used to make fuel. It's a specific type of oil. It's called oil tar sand. Yeah. And but and I'm not an expert on this, but from what the research I've done, my understanding is, well, when that isn't going to be in the market, what they do is they take other oil to process to then fill the gap of what's not there, because they can use other types of oil to produce. So that's for like producing petroleum-based products, like maybe plastic and other stuff like that. Well, if you don't have that oil tar sand, well, then you're just going to use the petroleum or the typical oil that may be used to produce gas or diesel or whatever. So it then depletes that supply. So though Keystone XL did not supply crude oil to be produced into gas, what it has done is, by that not being there and so on, then this oil that is being pulled back. And then also have to take into account that oil is one of the few markets that is completely speculative. So if you think that in 10 years that the policy is going to be way worse, and you got a president who's saying that, then you're going to divest. You're not going to invest more into the infrastructure and production and so on. So when the president says, I guarantee I'm going to end oil, then if I own an oil company, man, I'm looking where can I cut costs? I'm not going to build new facilities and new extraction equipment and all this. So no, this is purely Biden's fault. It's bad policy.
Okay, thank you for that. And I do want to add a clarification that in 2019, during the presidential campaign, Joe Biden did in fact speak to several supporters on video and stated that he would end oil companies. He has previously said, as vice president under the Obama administration, that he would end coal, and it was one of the policies of the Obama-Biden administration that they would necessarily skyrocket oil and gas company costs, especially coal, and to therefore affect the U.S. energy output. So that is correct information. I did want to just add that. Go ahead, Zach.
All right. So I'd like to touch real quick on and the next question kind of leads right off of this. Debbie Tomlin says all teachers should be packing, given proper training, and to be required to take insurance. Plus, have requirements to go to the shooting range like every 3 months, plus get involved with the National Rifle Association. All right, so to touch on that comment real quick, I actually ended my membership to the NRA for personal reasons, hence the birth and formation of National Firearms Coalition. I absolutely have no faith and no belief in anything or any organization for gun rights advocacy that compromises. So I won't sit here and go on about that. But as far as teachers packing, the next question that I have is, how do you feel about union representatives saying that it is not the teacher's duty to protect children in the event of a disaster or mass shooting, stemming from training? So after Uvalde, there was a couple of, and I don't remember them by name, I would have to look, a couple of union reps or teachers that were arguing on Twitter about how we shouldn't expect the teacher to jump in front of a bullet for a kid, that the kids are given proper training and that they're put through training protocols for storm events, for mass shooting events, for bomb threats, to basically be trained on how to respond to these types of scenarios, and that if one student is not following that protocol during a live situation of one of those events, that it should not be the teacher's responsibility to put their body in harm's way to save one student who doesn't follow their protocols and their training.
I think he's an ignorant fool. You got to keep in mind that school is compulsory, right? So if I have to take my kids and drop them at the school has a requirement and a reasonable requirement. It is reasonable to expect them and require them to protect my child. And if I was a teacher and I was not armed and someone came into my classroom, I would be the first one to take a bullet, because I would be the one trying to take them down, because a third grader can't. 20 third graders can't. You teach the kids to huddle in the corner or to hide under their desks, that doesn't stop anything, okay? That is such ridiculous crap. And I actually saw that, I didn't see him say it, but I saw something about it and read it, and I was just, it kind of pissed me off, because no, you do have a requirement to protect my child. You have a requirement to protect every one of your children. And I actually know quite a few teachers, and every one of them I've talked about this stuff said basically the same thing. I'll be the first to be shot if someone comes to my classroom. I want to carry there so I can protect my kids, And I think that, actually Wesley's got a lot of teachers in his family. Wesley Smith, he's running in District 2. You guys know him, but for people who don't, me and him are friends, and we cross campaign. He's a great guy. So he has siblings, his sisters that are teachers and stuff like that, and they love their kids. Most teachers love their kids. So I think it's ridiculous. I also think it's ridiculous that anything that is public sector has unions. I don't believe that anything public sector should have a union. NEA is trash, and it should go.
Okay.
All right. And thank you for that answer. That's very helpful.
Good answer.
Now, I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to combine a couple of questions here.
I'm gonna be able to give you guys a little more time than I said, because
Oh, no problem.
everything. I want you to be able to ask all your questions.
I have a ton. Don't worry. I can time, so it'll be fine. But my question, in part, is directed towards your March 25th, 2022 interview with William Wallace for America, in case people want to look that up. And in that discussion, where you were speaking about doctors, in particular the congressional cap on doctors, which is from the Centers for Medicaid Services, which was established in 1999, we see that the United States government actually pays for residents to go into hospitals to train to become doctors. And there is a cap on that, as reported by the Washingtonian on April 13th of 2020. This is something that you were very concerned about. At the same time, there is a push right now, as noted in the October 23rd, 2017 article. Dr. Tim Garrison, who is the Director of Health and Policy Institute of Texas Medical Center, suggested that there should be a cap on the salary of doctors. In your discussion with William Wallace about this cap, the current cap on funding, you wanted to increase the funding to allow for more doctors, which goes against Dr. Garson. Can you tell me, what should the cap be lifted to? How many doctors should we increase by? And where's the funding coming from for that?
Okay, so I actually, if you go back to it, I never said I wanted to increase the funding for it. What I want to do is raise the cap or eliminate it completely, not the funding specifically. And here's why. One of the arguments with this is that if you get too many doctors or too many people in a specific area of medicine, whether it be nurses, doctors, nurse practitioners, surgeons, whatever, then what happens is there's not enough business to go around. So then this doctor is going to starts having less patients. He has to raise his prices to make his wage, and so on. And what that does is it drives up the cost. I actually think so that's why they cap it, because then you'll have more patients, and costs won't go up. But the problem is that there's the loss of supply and demand. So if the supply is set and the demand has a time where it rises, well, then what does that do? Now it's going to raise the cost, right? Because let's say, because right now it's actually a good example. All right, we have the medical industry as a whole has shortages across the board. My wife is occupational therapy, and she where she works at her one place she's PRN, and another place she works for Mercy, and then somewhere else, and they have shortages. And so when you have shortages, first you're creating longer delays. You're also increasing the costs for patients. So if you let the free market handle itself, you won't end up in a situation where, let's say you remove the cap, you're not going to be in a situation where there's too many doctors, so they're having to raise their prices because they have less patients. What you're going to do is, if there's not the business there, they're going to leave that field and find another one, just like every other field, every other industry, every other profession, and it balances itself out. It will find that natural balance, and when there's times of higher demand, you'll get more doctors. When there's times of lower demand, you'll get less doctors. That is how pretty much every profession works. But we have create this artificial level of supply and demand, and now we're really seeing the consequences of it, because now we have a massive shortage because of all the hospitals that fired people for not getting the jab, and my wife's was one that did that, and my wife, luckily, we're very active in our church, and we immediately filled out a religious exemption, and they actually required us to take it to our pastor, and he was to fill it out and say why and so on. They granted hers, and they rejected a lot of people's, and they lost their careers. And then all of a sudden, now they have a shortage. Now they get backlogged on things. And I look at, like, my son had to have tubes put in his ear, surgery, and he kept getting these double ear infections. And they told us if he gets one more in a 6-month period of time, that he can't get anything in the box, so he needs to get it done, right? Well, so he gets one, so we're like, okay. We went to schedule an appointment. They're like, yeah, it'll be a month before we can see him for his exam, and then you'll be able to schedule. And we're like, are you kidding me? My son he's miserable, and they checked, and like, wait, we had a cancellation for like 3 days from now. We could put you in there. And my wife's like, yeah. And then went in, had the exam, and then went to schedule a surgery, and we were like a month and a half out, and before they started firing people off, that's something where you'd have been in within a few days to get the exam and in for surgery about a week later. And there's a lot of these medical treatments and surgeries and things like that when you need them, you're in a long wait.
So
if you remove the cap, you would find that balance. You wouldn't create an abundance of doctors where they have to raise their prices. I believe it would actually have the opposite effect.
Okay, so let me just clarify one point. I want to make sure I understand. Currently, it's reported, and by the way, the initial article is from the Associated Press with Dr. Kim Garson. But in this current environment, there is a shortage of about 1.8 million doctors. It is estimated that there's going to be a shortage of 124,000 doctors going forward. So in removing the cap this time, we would necessarily see an increase. Presumably, by removing the cap, we would see an increase in the number of doctors. Funding would be necessary for that. Do you have an idea of where you would get that funding from?
I would have to look more into it to figure that out. I know that a lot of this stuff, when it comes to doctor, there is a lot of funding. It's not like a lot of things where you pay your whole education along the way. There is a lot of grants and things like that. I don't know a whole lot about that side of things of the financing, where that comes from. I just know that it is supplemented. I personally think we might be able to come up with a way that, where we don't actually have to use tax dollars for it. Maybe we come up with, if you're going to be a doctor, that supplemental piece is a loan you have to take. But let's make it zero interest. Since you are doing something in society that is going to be necessary, or maybe a super, super low interest, and you're going to be a doctor, so you're going to be able to pay it back. We have to stop looking at looking over to the taxpayers, to working people to pay for everything out there the government wants. And I do think this is one that is necessary, because we need to have a strong medical environment in our nation. We have the best medicine in the world. We are responsible for creating, I don't know the percentage, something like 90% of new cures and treatments. And we just need to let it come back to being free market. When more regulations and things the government puts in on it, the worse it's going to get. Just like everything, inject government into anything, what do you get? A worse product.
Yeah, it is a difficult question, and there's a lot of factors. So I do appreciate your answer. I thank you for that.
I had a question, and I was reading comments, and I kind of forgot about it. Debbie Tomlin, I just want to point out the comment real quick, because it kind of seems like this was something close to her. You can check on this. Millard South High School was shot up, the principal and one other. The teenager who did this was an Omaha, Nebraska police department, working as a detective. While he had a troubled son, he did not secure his weapons. Things got so bad for him that he had to move out of state. His name is Detective Butler. His son shot himself after he shot a couple of people at Millard South High School. I had took my best friend's daughter to school for her. I remember reading a story that I think might be that very same story. But that the Debbie, it hits home all the time for everybody that it hits home for. It wasn't too long ago we had a police officer that, what was that story? He kidnapped his own kids and had help with another help from another officer that was still active duty, and he shot them all or something. I don't remember. Or was that, Mike? Wasn't that just a few months ago?
I don't recall that one at the moment.
It was kind of close by to me in Maryland. An officer, or a former officer that had just gone off the deep end, kidnapped his children, and he had help from an active duty officer to do this stuff in a stolen car. And when they finally found them, they were all shot dead in the car on the side of the road. So it doesn't matter what walks of life you come from. The mental health awareness is a big thing. So I'll use that for my next question. We've discussed how you would, propose to make schools safer. We've discussed how you feel about red flag laws. Knowing that we have so much mental instability going on in the nation, without really putting any type of excuses behind it. But let's look at the mental instability post-COVID. As we're coming out the other side of COVID, there's a very large percentage of the younger generations that have been locked up at home for a year and a half that are starting to show serious signs of depression, anxiety, mental instability. How do you propose that we better recognize and treat and bring back some sort of mental health awareness to the states?
This is a really tough one, and I'll say we haven't talked about red flag laws on here on this video. Me and you talked about them private when we were talking, so I would love to touch on those ones if we have time.
Yeah, we will.
But the mental health thing, it's really bad, and you know, my son's only 2.5, so I didn't see it with him, but I have friends who have kids that were doing the remote learning, and it got bad for them. Like, a lot of kids are having a lot of struggles right now. I can't cite the numbers, but I remember reading this report, I think it was about 6 months ago, about the dramatic increase in depression amongst teenagers, young teens and stuff, because of the being separated from their peers. I mean, can you imagine, guys, when we went to high school and stuff, or middle school, if we didn't get to hang out with people, see people, play, and BS around and have a good time if we were just stuck in our homes all day, every day? I can't imagine that, and I don't have an answer for this one. Like, I'm not a mental health expert, so I don't know how we can move forward and try to help these kids. I know there are a lot of kids with a lot of problems. I know depression has climbed dramatically. I know suicide has climbed. Drug use among teenagers has hit record levels, and we're not talking about 18, 19-year-olds. We're talking about like 12 and 13-year-olds doing drugs. Like, that's crazy to me. I think that we need to learn from this and never let it happen again. Let's let our kids be kids and live their lives, you know, and setting aside the remote stuff, there's also the kids that have all this mental damage from the fear of being like told this is a plague and it's going to kill us all, and they're living their lives afraid of everything. You know, that also caused a lot of damage to a lot of kids, you know.
Yep. Kids are the most impressionable at younger ages. And the biggest importance to a child, especially younger children, you know, these, like the ones that have recently lost their lives in Uvalde, safety, feeling safe is one of the biggest things that's really important to a child.
Absolutely.
In going through COVID, with all of the mainstream media and everybody around them freaking out, saying how unsafe everybody was definitely damaging to the psyche. I'm going through experiences right now with our 15-year-old daughter that is going through severe depression, and it has even led to severe social anxiety. Pre-COVID, she was going to school. I mean, she had her, you know, preteen moments, and her depression was manageable, and we were working with it, and it was okay. Post-COVID, sending her back to school, she was extremely social anxious. Like, she couldn't stand being around all the people. She was freaking out all the time. So it's kind of firsthand experience dealing with our daughter, and it's something that's really detrimental that everybody needs to be made aware of, because this is the next generation of people going out into society.
Yeah, can you imagine? Because we've never seen people with such depression issues, and I don't know the right way to word it when it comes to all these young kids, but with mental issues, and coming in, a whole generation of them coming into the adult world and having this damage. We have no idea what kind of effect that's going to have, and it had a lot of effect and took a lot of toll on adults. I did a police ride along in 2020 after we've been in lockdowns for about, I think, 4 months or so, and we were going around for, when you do a ride along, you usually go with supervisor, so because they're jumping from, so you see a lot of different things. We went to this one place, and it was a suicide, and I've never seen that kind of thing. And I went in, and it was an adult, and when we were, well, not we, I was standing there, but when the detective, when the supervisor I was with were talking to the family, they said that he was laid off, that everyone he worked with was laid off, or, well, not essential. And he was just at home all day, depressed, and he couldn't find a job, and was just waiting to be told he can come back to work. And it just got to him, and he took a 38 revolver and put it to his chest. So, and that's an adult. That's someone who, has lived life and has dealt with hardships and as an adult probably went into being adulthood without having all this anxiety built up and all this mental damage from, like what these kids are facing, of being locked down, of being told they can't see their friends. So what's going to happen when that next generation hits adulthood, or this generation hits adulthood, and they face real life problems? Are they going to be able to handle it? Are we going to see suicide? That's my fear.
It's not going away anytime soon. It's going to be. Am I a robot? Can you still hear me?
No, we're
Yeah.
talking now.
Okay. It's not going away anytime soon. And this next generation of kids coming into society, everybody has to understand that, these are the next voters. These are the next employees. These are the next people that are going to be running for offices, people that are going to be getting into police academy and becoming police officers. So the lack of mental health awareness and treatment plans, and as much as I hate to say it, institutionalization and rehabilitation for people is very detrimental. I'm sorry to hear that you had to experience that on a ride-along. For sure, it's rough. Suicide being up is, especially in the younger generation, is really scary. And I can't imagine what parents go through when a teenager or a young individual takes their life. We'll go ahead and finish that one up. Let Mike head on his next question.
Okay. I thank you for your previous answer. And yes, that is a very difficult situation. I am sorry to hear about that. It is difficult for children, exponentially more than adults who have theoretically the means to cope. But let me ask you a different question. Going to your website, which happens to be Brandon for Missouri, that's Brandon, the number 4, Missouri, that you have. And on there, you have several different positions that you speak about. In particular, you talk about taxation and corporate taxes and personal taxes. We look to, in 5 years, to seek to eliminate the corporate tax. And at the same time, you also suggest that new businesses would be enabled to use their 401ks up to $100,000 towards starting a new business to invigorate small businesses. My question would be, what if a person uses 100%, and let's say they have $50,000 in their 401k, would they be able to use 100% of that and therefore put it all at risk and have nothing for their retirement? And if they did do that, what would be the fail-safe, or is there a fail-safe that you are looking to put into that to allow them to put that retirement money at risk and still be able to retire if that risk fails?
Okay, so as far as where you said, think about eliminating corporate taxes within 5 years, I think what you're actually referring to is not eliminating corporate taxes, but for certain investments corporations make, it would be a sliding scale of taxation adjustment to incentivize them to make the investment into business and so on. As far as people, I don't think there should be a safety. That's how we've gotten where we are. Is we have to give everyone a safety net where you're not going to fail. It's a risk. You want to be a business owner, you want to take the chance and the gamble. That's part of the American dream, is the risk of, I might lose it all, I might fail. I think you should be able, if you want to, you have 100 grand in there, you want to pull 100 grand and roll the dice, that's on you. And you have to use every bit of it for your business. You can't pull 100 and put 20 into your pocket to go buy a new side-by-side. You have to be able to back it all up, show your costs along the way. And, and I think if we incentivize entrepreneurship, then we can build back the backbone of this nation. As far as business goes, it was roughly 50% in 2020. Roughly 50% of businesses were small business, and about something along the lines. I'm sorry, roughly 50% of jobs were in the private market were small business jobs. And I don't know where it actually landed. It's been quite a while since I looked into this, but economists were at first estimating that 1/3 of them were going to go under. Then that number shifted and it came closer to being about 55%. And I don't know where it landed at the end of the day. It's been a long time and I've been busy. It's hard to keep up with cycles these days with so much. But let's figure at the end of the day, roughly, that the economists and experts were saying that at the end of the day, through COVID, roughly half of small businesses going to go under. I personally know quite a few businesses in my district near me that went under, plus all the messages I got from people around my district who went under. Like there was a family about this woman and her mom, just about 30 miles from here. They actually reached out to me towards the beginning of my campaign, maybe 2 months or 3 months in, maybe in 2020, saying, we just launched this business. We put our life savings into it. Now they're telling us that we can't open our doors. And we literally just launched it. We put everything into this and they're telling us we can't open. And we have overhead. We have bills. And, and they lost it. The mother and the daughter both put their savings into this and opened this business. And then right after opening it, get told, close your doors. You can't be open. You're not essential. And they lost everything. You had government, politicians, picking winners. And that's exactly what they were doing when they said, you're not essential, close your business. Okay. We saw all the essential businesses, the big box stores, all those, boom, record sales, everything else. Right? Everyone's job is essential to them and their family. The government does not have a right to tell anyone they did not. So I don't think government should ever have the ability to tell people you can't work or you're not essential or so on, So playing back to that, you take the risk under the circumstances and it's on you. Now the problem in 2020 was it wasn't on you. Government told you, tough, you fail now. You don't get to drive your car into someone's house and then not fix it. I'm against government intervening and paying everyone all this crap, but if you're going to tell someone they can't work, you need to make them whole. You need to pay them what they're worth. The cost of that business that forced them to close.
Sorry, we have a slight background noise. I just want to clarify. No, I got you. You'd fix it. So just to clarify, you have said that you believe 100% of the funds up to $100,000 can be used. It is market risk. You believe that if someone has that desire, they should go forward with it, but it is a risk and it must be used entirely for that business. I have understood you correctly there. And I also want to issue a correction on something I stated, which is that I incorrectly said that in 2020 you got 14.6%. It's actually 14.8%. It was in second place. And final correction, approximately, depending on the state, 25 to 35% businesses have closed due to the 2020 pandemic. On average, it's about 30% each. There's different sources with different numbers, but you are correct in the numbers and the range you spoke about. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear. All right, thank you for that.
So we need to build back 30% of our small businesses. So we need to give the opportunity for people to do that. And the problem is I know people who want to start businesses that are afraid to. Because what just happened? I mean, wouldn't you? We also need to remove the barriers. The barriers, the hoops you have to jump through to start a business is ridiculous. I was a business owner back in 2007 or 2008 when I got in, I became a door operator. And the amount of regulations, hoops, and paperwork I had to do, and then if you screw something up, you get these ridiculous fines. Those are deterrents for people. Let's make it easier to be an entrepreneur. Let's make it easier to try to build a business and live that American dream.
All right.
Hey, Mike.
Hello, Michael.
Brandon Wilkinson, this is Mike Marshall. This is one of the other guys that sits in with the political interviews. He is the constitutionalist. Mike Marshall, if you'd like to go ahead and pop up a quick introduction real quick before the next question, feel free.
Hello, Brandon, and thank you for sitting down for this interview. Sorry I'm late, folks. Things just took a lot longer than I expected. So, I'm Mike Marshall. I'm one of the co-founders of the Liberty First Foundation. We are a constitutional advocacy organization. Essentially, we are trying to restore the Constitution back to its original intent. We do have a focus on the Second Amendment, but we are also very much working to restore the entirety of the Constitution, not just the Second Amendment. That's kind of where I'm from. You can find us on l1f.us.
All right. I'll ask my next question, and then we can let Mike Marshall ask a question real quick.
Okay.
Touching on red flag laws, HR 7910, that's 2938. The federal government trying to push more red flag laws down to the state levels and give states more authority and, I guess, funding to instill, put in place, and enforce stricter red flag laws in states where they already exist and red flag laws in states where they currently don't exist. What is your feelings on red flag laws? Who do you think they affect the most? And how would you propose to either change red flag laws or do away with them? Okay. Which would you do?
Red flag laws are incredibly unconstitutional. They violate our Second Amendment, our Fourth Amendment, our Fifth Amendment, and then our Sixth Amendment. And there is an argument that can be made against the Sixth. Well, if it doesn't violate the Sixth, then it violates the Seventh. I say 2, 4, 5, 6. I would never support red flag laws. They remove your rights of due process. You are guilty until proven innocent. Looking at this bill that just came through, and I've not read the entire thing. I've read through it. I've read most of it and then buzzed through some piece of it. I'll have it finished probably tomorrow. I've just been crazy busy campaigning. There's a lot of bad there. Like right off the bat, one part of it. So like let's say that your ex-girlfriend reports you, right? And she says, he assaulted, or he's a threat, whatnot. And they come and take your guns, right? A report is placed against you. It doesn't matter who it's from. First, it doesn't set repercussion, and I've said this before in interviews in the past, that if there's going to be red flag laws, which I am 100% against, if there's going to be, there has to be severe punishments for anyone who files a false report. The problem with this bill that just came through is it does say that there's going to be a punishment for filing a false report, but they don't state what it's going to be, and they push it down to the states. So, well, do you think that a state like California or New York, who hates guns, do you think they're going to have a real punishment for filing a false report?
Well, not only will they not have a severe punishment, but before you go too much further on this, who is going to be in charge of, and how is an individual in charge of that going to be able to prove if somebody did file a false flag report?
Yeah, exactly. And Vass,
Yes.
I can do another 15. I can do another 15 minutes or so, so we'll be good. Another problem with it is it does say that you can defend yourself, of course, at your own expense. So not only did you take away my due process, but then you said I have to pay to defend myself. I have to pay to prove myself innocent. Well, this comes back to one of the pieces of legislation I pre-wrote. Well, I fully pre-wrote it. I wrote the basic write-up on it, which is the Fair Legal Practices Act. So if you prosecute me for a crime and I successfully defend myself, then that entity, that court system, that prosecuting office, they have to pay back my costs, because I've proven my innocence, but I've been financially punished, and that will also, it'll cut back on frivolous prosecutions and predatory prosecution. Well, in this situation, if again, I will never support red flag law, but if that's going to happen, then it shouldn't be up to me to prove my innocence when my guilt has never been proven. I should have the ability to pick my own lawyer to defend myself, and the government pays for it, period, whether I win or lose. Because I have not committed a crime. I have not done anything. I have not been determined guilty. You are saying I'm guilty until I prove my innocence. Well, then you need to pay for my cost of my innocence. I should not be punished in the process of proving my innocence. It's just such trash. There was a couple little bitty things in that bill that I think are good things. Try to pass them on their own, and we'll see how that goes. But I would never support that bill. I will never support any bill that violates any of our constitutional rights. I'm a constitutional originalist. I believe that our Constitution is absolutely the foundation of our nation. And when you build a house, you start with the foundation, right? And then you build the house. Well, you can't go back in and start messing the foundation and check and messing around and dramatically changing it. Your house will collapse. Right? The Constitution is absolute. The Second Amendment is absolute. The First Amendment is absolute. And I will never, ever support any piece of legislation that infringes upon any of our rights, especially our First or Second, because without those two, we lose freedom. And furthermore, I'm sorry? Oh, I thought someone said that. Furthermore, let's say there was a bill that was just the most amazing bill in the world, and everything about it was just perfect and would fix every problem we have, and there was just one little bitty piece of infringement in there. I'd be a no vote. I will never compromise our Constitution. That is how we got to where we are. People say you got to give a little bit. You got to give a little to get a little, right? Well, yeah, in general legislation and so on, but when it comes to our rights, you never give anything. Period.
Absolutely.
That's how you have be not free. We are the only free nation in the world. People constantly say, no, there's tons of free nations. There's tons of nations with free speech. There's, you know what? No, there's not. We are the only country in this world where we actually have free speech. Go to Germany and say something about trans people and see how fast you get arrested. Go to Canada. Be a comedian and make a simple joke about Asians, and you'll get hauled in front of a tribunal, what's it called, a human rights tribunal, and get a $50,000 fine, maybe a year of prison. We are the only nation with free speech, and we are the only nation with a Second Amendment and a right to bear arms. These are God-given rights that everyone in the world has. The thing is, only our nation recognized it. Only our nation has looked at it and said, our founders say that these are your God-given inherent rights. We recognize that, and we are going to protect them. It's essentially a contract between the government and the people, the governed and the governing. And the governing saying, we recognize these are your God-given rights, and we're going to protect them. They take an oath to protect them, and all they do is try to tear them down. And we need people in D.C. who are going to fight back, who are going to be loud and on the front. Like me, I don't care if I piss people off. I say it all the time. I don't care if I piss people off. I don't want to piss people off, but I'm fighting for my country. I'm fighting so my son can be free. I'm fighting so my nephews and nieces can be free. Zach, I'm fighting so your children can be free. I want our children, I want this next generation to have more freedom than we had growing up. And at the rate we're at, they're not going to have any freedom if people don't stand up, get out there, fight, be loud, and fight. So
that's all right. To finish up on that topic real quick, because we probably won't get around to another gun question. Felony reform. After a felon serves their sentence and gets out of prison, nonviolent offenders, we actually have a lot of people involved with us. I've seen people make comments about it on a couple of other political candidates' pages. The red flag laws and the you can't own a firearm as a felon, as a convicted felon, are the two biggest things in the 2A that we come across all the time. Would you, and you don't have to go into an elaborate answer just so we can move on to Mr. Marshall, but would you agree with a legislation being written and proposed to basically reform felony convictions to people that have served their time, done their parole, become functional parts of society again if they are a nonviolent felon, to reinstate their rights?
absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
Quick example, my cousin wrote some bad checks whenever she had a settlement coming like 3 weeks out. She wrote bad checks to pay her rent, groceries, and car payment. What she did was bank fraud. It was felony. She paid the money back within 3 weeks when she got her settlement, and now she doesn't have a right to protect her kids with a gun. That's ridiculous. She was no threat to anyone. She wasn't a danger to anyone, and she should have her Second Amendment right. If you are a non-violent felon, you should have your right. Period.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike Marshall.
Okay, so like they said, I'm the constitutionalist, and I'm going to kind of tag off of red flag law, especially the bills that were just recent. One that's actually ongoing, the process of being passed, and the one that was just actually signed into law. You're running for the United States Congress for the state of Missouri. Can you show me anywhere in the Constitution, now don't mind you, I'm not looking at the amendment, where Congress would even have the authorization to initiate action on this bill?
No, it's unconstitutional at its core.
Exactly. Exactly.
All,
There's no
just
part.
earlier, I said all gun control is unconstitutional. Period.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we take the Second Amendment out, can you tell me why it would not be constitutional?
Just right off the bat, I would say the 10th Amendment. The power was never delegated
Take
to the federal government.
take all the Bill of Rights out.
Take all the Bill of Rights out, and what would make that bill unconstitutional?
Yep.
Well, I haven't read it in its entirety. I've read most of it. You know what? I'd probably have to think about this one and get back to you. That's actually a kind of a good question. I mean, give me a second to rack my brain. If you want to ask a different question while I'm sitting here thinking, I might be able to come up with
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to put you on the spot because,
No,
like I said,
No,
I'm
wait.
a constitutionalist, and if you're elected to office, you're going to take an oath to uphold, support, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Okay? And if you don't know it, you can't very well take that oath.
Yes.
Well, and I'll ask my question, but because I know you wanted a moment to answer Mike's question, I need that time too, because I don't know the answer.
Well, I have an answer for that.
Quick, what is it? Quick.
If you take away all the Bill of Rights and there is no Second Amendment, they wouldn't be trying to pass gun control legislation.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, you wouldn't have a right to a gun, so there you go.
Exactly. There would be no legislation being introduced to take away guns.
All right. So I'm really curious, Michael. I'm not sure that I would be able, Michael Marshall. I'm not sure that I can come up with what would make that bill unconstitutional if there was no Bill of Rights. So
Because there is no place in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution which enumerates the powers of Congress that authorizes Congress to take any action towards gun control.
Huh, good point.
Good point. Well said. That was a damn good question.
That's
Hey.
why James
I think
Madison
so.
originally said that we did not need a Bill of Rights. It's because Congress has only had the authority to act upon the items enumerated in Article 8 or Section 1, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution.
You know,
That was a good question.
a lot of people don't know things, so it's a.
I would say the 10th Amendment plays exactly into that, though.
Well, it does. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why the 10th Amendment was put in. But
Yes.
if you actually look at the enumerated powers of Congress, there is no place in there that would authorize the Congress to enact anything on mental health, health care, gun legislation, etc. Those are actually state level power that should be enacted at the state level.
Well, almost everything that the federal government does is actually powers that are delegated to the states, not the federal government. Just a bunch of coward politicians let the federal government steal those powers over the years.
Exactly.
I won't be one of those cowards.
That's
Okay.
good to hear.
Okay, and those are issues that need to be raised by our elected representative. Okay, when they see that something is outside the authority of Congress, they need to be saying, hey, we aren't authorized to do this. Show me how we are authorized to do this. And then I will consider voting yes or no on it.
I know I only have, this is my final question.
If you have more after this, I'm really enjoying it. I rarely get these types of questions, so I actually really enjoy it. So if you got more after this, we can go longer.
I'm only going by, I was going by the time you gave, so
I'm having a good time.
Started as an hour too.
I have more. It's not a problem for me. Let me ask, though, because I was going to say, and I will say, you have a choice. Let's give it a little bit of a grab bag here. We have student loans or the VA. Tell me, which one would you want to ask me ask a question about?
I missed the first part. You said something or the VA.
College loans or the VA?
Why don't we hit them both?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, on your website, again, that's the Brandon for Missouri site that I advise people to look at. you speak about the Veteran Affairs Administration and that you are seeking to improve the Veteran Affairs Administration. So my question would be, in reference to that, where is the funding coming from, or how would you fund those improvements to the Veteran Affairs? Second question, looking at your Facebook post, your Facebook page, which was on June 15th of 2022, you stated that you're looking to limit the payments to colleges where they have restricted free speech. So I want to try and understand how would you determine whether or not a college has restricted free speech, and what about that is balanced learning opportunities that you seek to emphasize?
Okay, we'll start with the VA. So this one's a complex one, but it's actually pretty simple.
Mhm.
So I'd like to fix the VA. I actually think, though, it is not fixable. So I would like to completely dissolve it. And let's hand over our soldiers an insurance card that they can take to any hospital and get the benefits of what they should be given at the VA. I have a serious problem with this. It's a big issue to me. My brother's a war hero, Bronze Star for Valor, Purple Heart, 21 documented combat injuries, 3 years of combat deployments. And when he was forced into medical retirement because of his combat injuries, I saw how they threw him to the wayside. And then they messed up his pay, and he was getting about a third of what he should have been getting. And he called them, and they said it'll be right next month. And then it wasn't. They said it'll be right next month. And that went on for 4 months. I did not know what was going on. My brother's a war hero. He doesn't go to people with his problems. He's a strong man. And someone reached out to me and said that your brother's selling some guns or a gun. I said, no, you're mistaken. And he said, no, your brother's definitely selling a SIG 357. And I said, there's no way. That's like his favorite gun. But you named a gun that I know he carries, so let me call him. Because in my family, we don't sell guns. We buy guns. Our collections get bigger, not smaller. We're a very 2A family. I call my brother and I say, hey, man, what's going on? I told you're selling it, your SIG 357. And he says, he's like, oh, yeah, man, I just don't like it anymore. And I'm like, BS, I know that's one of your favorite guns. You guys probably know, but for everyone not listening, it's like a 9mm. It's a 9mm projectile, but it's neck down from like a 40. So it's a very fast flying, very high performing round. And my brother loved it. So I knew he was full of it, but it was a valuable gun. I said, BS, what's going on? And he told me they've been messing my pay up for 4 months. And he has a son, and he's trying to keep a roof over him and his son's head and food in their bellies. So he's doing what a father would do, which is make the sacrifices. And the thing is, these are sacrifices he should have never had to make. And I'm like, man, I've been preparing to run for Congress for this back in 2015. I've been preparing to run for Congress for like 5 years. I know exactly how to take care of these problems. Let me make some calls. And I got the runaround, calling the departments that should be dealing with. And they're like, giving me the runaround. So I'm like, okay, forget the so-called congressman, who happens to be the guy currently holding that seat, who is said to be a champion of our military and veterans, who likes to say he's a champion of our military and veterans. And I call him up, and I get a staffer, tell him what's going on, and the staffer's like, Lane, he's a champion of our veterans, and he's probably going to want to talk to you. We mind holding for a minute? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Lane actually gets on the phone. I tell him what's going on. We talk for a few minutes. I tell him I got my brother's DD-214s. I can prove everything I'm telling you. And he says, all right, yeah, tell your brother that not to worry anymore, that I'm going to get this stuff fixed. And the thing is, he had the power to get it fixed. Mm-hmm. I knew he did. I wasn't sure how much time it would take. Within about a year from then, I knew what it would have taken. 2 phone calls, 2 to 5 minutes per phone call. My brother's stuff could have been fixed. He said he'd call back in 3 to 4 days, to call my brother back in 3 to 4 days. 3 or 4 days later, about 4 days later, my brother calls me. He's like, I haven't heard from him. Should we call him? And I was like, no, he's a congressman. He's busy. Let's give him, some more time. And after a week, I'm like, all right, done waiting. I called, and I got a staffer and left a message. And then I called again and got a staffer and left a message. And they kept saying, he will call back. He will call back. That was 7 years ago. My phone still hasn't rang. It took 14 months for my brother's retirement to get fixed. It took 16 months for his disability to get fixed. And when they got it corrected, they did give him the back pay. But he already lost everything. And you don't get value when you're losing stuff or selling stuff. So he was barely able to recoup a small percentage of what he had before when he got the back pay. That should never happen. I also saw my brother sitting on waiting lists at the VA when he needs an appointment, making a call and having to wait weeks, sometimes months, sitting on a waiting list to get surgeries to repair combat injuries. Are you kidding me? So I don't think the VA can actually be fixed. Maybe it can. I don't think it can, and I don't think it's worth investing into it. I'm not sitting here saying that we need to spend tax dollars on giving stuff away. What we need to do is we need to spend tax dollars giving these soldiers what they were promised. Part of the deal. It's part of their package. So eliminate the VA. There's a lot of waste there. They don't do a good job. Some VAs do. The one up by us actually does, but they do a pretty good job. But if you've ever been into a VA waiting room, you would never accept walking into a hospital and seeing that. So get rid of the VAs is what I think the end result is, the only solution. And let's let them go to the private market because the private market is better at everything. Then as far as the cost, I really don't care. This is part of the deal the soldiers were promised. So we have to take care of them. They, unlike all these subsidies, we give all this stuff away. These are men that this is what they were promised. It was part of, you got to look at it like what it is. It was part of their pay. It's the government said, you serve, you fight for us. We're going to take care of you medically. We're going to take care of you. And then you get done and they say, hey, we really don't care about, your injuries, or we don't care that you need medical treatments. We don't care that you need to talk to someone because you got bad PTSD because your best friend got shot in the head right next to you. Throw you to the wayside. No, unacceptable. So that's my solution.
I've never agreed with, before you go on regarding the student loans, I've never agreed with the way the VA operates, and I know that you and I have had conversations about this, and Wesley and I have had very in-depth conversations about this. I've got a lot of really good friends my age that served across seas, that one of which is really messed up now. And he is currently going through the same bullshit, is what I'll say it is, because there's no other word for it, that your brother did. And he is also a war hero for saving his entire unit. And I've never agreed with how the welfare system works, and people can live off the welfare system and get $800,000-$900,000 a month in food stamps, free health care, free medicine, all of this stuff. And our veterans struggle to just get by. So I'm really happy that Mike asked that question. That was going to be one of the questions that I touched on, but now it's out of the way. And I'm really happy with hearing your answer for it. So I'll let you go ahead and finish off Mike's question regarding student loans and stuff.
No,
just
go ahead, Mike. Memory on it. By the way, as a man who served in the Marines, and my father was a Marine, Vietnam, I understand everything you're saying about the VA, and yes, it is abysmal, in my opinion. So I thank you for that answer. To restate, and this is the June 15th, 2022 comment from your Facebook page about limiting student loans to colleges that restrict free speech. And I'm asking, how would you determine that they have would you determine that they have restricted free speech? And to clarify, what is a balanced learning opportunity that you spoke about in that post on Facebook?
Okay, so there's a lot to this one. I'll try to make it as simple as I can because I've been giving long answers. All right, so I think right off the bat, one way you can look at are they restricting free speech is, do they have a free speech zone on their campus? Because there are a lot of colleges and higher institutions that have a free speech zone, and that is the only place you can be where you can actually say whatever you want. If you have that free speech space and you can't say whatever anywhere else, well, then you're restricting free speech. So you should actually get no federal funding. Almost all colleges get federal funding. You get no federal funding, period. As far as the limiting of the tuition, now that's actually a really complex one. And this is one that my campaign manager, he actually is a super intelligent man. He's got 2 degrees, degrees in finance and analytics, and then a couple MBAs. And this is one where we were working on, he's more the brains behind the formula. It was my ideas, and he's the one who has the experience in it. So he kind of worked together on this one. So I really need him sitting here next to me to really break it down. But basically, I guess there's this formula of looking at the way as student loans change over time, became guaranteed by the government and so on. The amount of money that was increased to be able to be given, you saw that in parallel to, you saw tuitions rise to follow it. Okay, so he understands, or he's done the research on this to figure out there's actually some sort of formula to figure out the balance of what a specific degree costs across the board. And you have places that are way above that, and you have places that are way below that. So if you're above that, then you are overcharging. So you can overcharge if you want. But if you're overcharging and you're restricting people's constitutional right of free speech, then you're going to lose your federal funding, and you're not going to be able to offset that by raising the tuition. And then the part about the restricting tuition would also come into play with what does the federal funding, if you count that in, what does that really take that up to being? And again, this is a really complex one, and this is more of like, it was my idea, and he was the one who actually knew how to break down the numbers and pull the formulas. So I don't mean to sit here and be like, I can't fully answer this. It's just, I don't understand the formula, but he does.
Let me clarify for people who are not familiar with politics, Congress, how bills and legislation is done. It is not uncommon for there to be a team to work out formulas and calculations. So it's not, this is not uncommon. It's not considered a dodge. That someone on a team worked on a formula and you're the presentation of that formula. So I don't want people to think, oh, well, you're not answering it. That's an appropriate answer. It is accurate to how our government runs. So I thank you for that.
And you know, just to touch on that, this is something where I have a problem with our Congress, because you have a lot of congressmen and women and senators that they don't bring the experts in. They'll rule on, like, in the Second Amendment's a perfect example here. You know, you see them come in and you read a bill that's just complete nonsense, and you know whoever is proposed this or wrote it knows nothing about firearms. This is a problem we have. You know, they want to all act like they know everything. No one knows everything. I don't know everything. I know a lot. I know a lot about a lot of issues, but I'm not an expert. And if it's something I know a lot about, but I'm not an expert, I'm going to get the experts. That's part of the thing where you can become more effective. And there are congressmen, and like you said, that's very common. You get the experts and you get the team in, and you figure it all out. And like you said, I'm the one who presents the package. It may be my idea, but I don't know how to formulate it, so I bring the experts. I think that it's ridiculous that we have all these politicians that want to act like they're an expert on everything, and then they don't consult the experts, and then they make bad legislation that hurts all of us. I've said before, if something comes up that I'm not an expert on, I don't specifically know, because you can't know it all. I will have the people on my team to come in that do, and they will be able to break it down and help. So together, we can work together to create the right package. And there's too many offices that don't do that.
I agree, and I understand completely. I do thank you for that answer. I think it was a fair answer to the question.
Debbie Tomlin, I don't know as if Brandon saw your comment. I've liked your ideas, and I've liked the way that you've been commenting and asking questions and commenting on questions that we ask. And I would agree with you. Before we move into the next question, in Nebraska, depending on what a person has a felony for, they have to be around 5 years. I would have to actually look this up because I don't know Nebraska law. But Debbie Tomlin says that they would have to be around 5 years of not getting into any trouble post felony conviction and serving their sentence. Then they do get their voting rights back. It should also happen for their guns as well, if and only if the felony wasn't a violent kind. So again, Nebraska law, I don't know 100%. I'd have to actually look into that. And like Brandon literally just stated, I actually have a couple of people on my team that are FFLs and former law enforcement that actually do sit down and analyze and break down state level laws for me when I do these types of speakings. And I haven't approached one for Nebraska yet, so I apologize that I can't touch more fringent on that. But I would agree with you 100% that if the felony is nonviolent, that once they get their voting rights back, they should also get all of their other rights back. And I actually don't think that it should have to have any type of probationary period. I think once an individual is convicted of a felony, if they go to jail or if they get put on probationary, stipulations, once they've served that sentence and served their debt to society, they should have their rights reinstated if it's a nonviolent felony. Nonviolent felony is how I feel about it. So moving on to the next question, I'll go ahead and let Mike Marshall ask another one since he came in late, and I know he's got some good questions about the Constitution. So go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm going to just touch on Debbie Tomlin's comment real quick. Debbie, you have some great insight and so forth. I've been kind of following your comments. I have one thing as far as any type of restrictions on felons. especially when it comes to guns. And this also hinges on red flag laws as well. If a person is considered too violent to own a firearm or to have in their possession a firearm, then why are they still in our society?
We've touched on that a lot.
Answer on it. If they're in our society, they should have all their rights because they're not a second-class citizen at that point. They still have the God-given right to be able to defend themselves against any threat that comes towards them.
I'd move out of Nebraska if that was the law.
So that's just my personal opinion. I know others won't agree with it, but that's the way I kind of feel about it.
No, I agree with you.
I agree with you. I was saying, Debbie, this popped up Debbie's comment in Nebraska. If someone breaks into your home, if you shoot or stab them, you have to prove that your life was in danger or you're going to jail. That's what I was referring to when I said I would, if that was a law, I'd move out of Nebraska.
Yeah. Well, in New York, you are required to try to retreat.
Yes. I was actually just going to.
Missouri. Yeah, we used to have that in Missouri.
You are required to retreat.
I was actually just going to add to that because Mike, do either of you know the actual number of states that require you to attempt to flee?
I believe the number is 5.
To me,
if I'm
all 5 of those states are failing their citizens because that is the most disgusting law I've ever heard of.
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree more. So I want to get back to student loans here for just a second. Okay? Because I want to touch on the constitutionality of the federal government having any involvement with student loans whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So you came up with formulas and so forth on federal funding for schools. How do you authorize that constitution?
No, I actually have stated before that I would like to remove all federal funding of colleges and so on, and that your primary schools, K through 12, should be funded on the state levels. But I just don't. I'm also a realist, and I just don't think we're going to be able to actually anytime soon get to the point of cutting all that. So I'm trying to look at ways how we can curtail it.
Well, I will commend you on that you are trying to curtail it, and that you've also taken a stand that you do believe the federal government is authorized to do so. Okay.
Yeah, and also the Department of Education, if it was up to me, to return that back to the states also.
Let me clarify something that we had said. I said 5 states. That's incorrect. States without a castle doctrine, explicitly considered a castle doctrine, would be D.C., Nebraska, New Mexico, and Vermont. Although in states such as New York, New Jersey, several others, the preference is that you run away, and then once you cannot run further, that's when the castle doctrine kicks in. So I did want to make that clarification because I was incorrect when I first stated it. So I thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay. So essentially there are an unknown number, because the federal government doesn't even know, of government agencies that are not accountable to the people or to Congress. What actions are you going to take to start curtailing some of these unconstitutional agencies?
So I've said before that I feel that all these ABC alphabet soup agencies, the vast majority of them are not only unconstitutional, but they're not necessary. They're agencies that jobs are to oversee that other agency. And give an example here. There's an agency that's specific purpose is to oversee the negotiations between unions and the employers, right? Well, then there's another agency that's above them that is to oversee the other agency is doing it right. And we have a lot of this in our government. Let's eliminate those. I've caught flack about this, but I always say what I believe, and that's what people love about me is I always say it, and I don't really care, because if you like what I stand for, you're going to love me in Congress. I actually think we should completely dissolve the FBI. It's shown that it is partisan and it has been used as a weapon. against our president, against us as citizens. Let's take all the critical duties of the FBI and let's turn it over to the U.S. Marshals. That's a real way we could get rid of the FBI. The bureaucracy we have is actually, it's a bigger problem than career politicians. They go hand in hand together. I'm a big term limit guy, but like I say before, when I give my term limits arguments, I give the positives and the negatives, and I say, well, here's the positives of term limits, here's the negatives of term limits. And if you look at them with a balanced mind and you're not biased, you're going to choose that we have to have term limits. Now, the thing about term limits are, if you cut them too short, you empower the bureaucracy, you empower all these agencies. So you also have to cut them down. I personally said it was in Mary's County Meet the Candidates night. I went out there, and one candidate there, there was people from state levels and local. A candidate said, I don't want to tear down the federal government. I don't want to tear down the government, blah, blah, blah. But we need to get it under control. And when I got up there, I said the opposite. I said, well, unlike that candidate, I actually do want to tear down the federal government because it's become a monster, and it was never intended to be anything close to what it is. Our federal government wasn't intended to be the size of what our state governments are. So we do need to tear down and turn everything back over to the states, like the Constitution calls for. Pretty much all these agency alphabet soup agencies are unconstitutional. They abuse their power and authority. There's more fraud in them than anywhere, which is ridiculous. There was this agency, and I can't say which one it was, but they had like a $50 million a year budget, right? And here's another problem with these agencies: you get an annual budget. If you don't spend it, the next year you'll get less. So they find ways to waste that money.
Yep.
So the next year, and there was this agency, they had a $50 million budget. It was like 11 employees or something like that. So you had employees that were using that agency's budget to pay their car payments, their children's college tuition. One of the guys, he was like the director of it. He had rented out a room in his basement to the agency for an exorbitant amount of money, where he then had the agency paid for 6 like top-of-the-line supercomputers in case something ever happened at the office where their systems went down. They could just go to his house and they would still be operational. And and when this all I don't know how this audit came about, but it came about, and they discovered like everyone in this agency was using agency money to pay their house payments, buy their jet skis, and pay their college tuition for their children. And that's one agency. I guarantee that is happening in every agency. The question is how much. We need to audit every agency out there, period. I actually have this idea to shrink the spending and the bureaucracy. And like I said earlier, I'm a realist. I don't think we're going to be able to get the government out of funding schools as a whole, so we got to whittle away at it, kind of like how they whittle away at our civil rights. So I had this idea of a way we could dramatically shrink bureaucracy in their spending, and I think it would really work. So, and I've never seen anyone publish anything about this. I'm going to say this is probably going to be the first time 3 of you have ever heard it, but maybe not, because I know that Vass is big into politics, you're big into Constitution and oversized government, so maybe you guys have seen somewhere someone say this. So I have this idea where what you do is incentivize not spending your budget. Incentivize cutting it down. And here's how you do it. You tell the employees of the agency, you say, every bit you're able to cut out of your spending from the prior year, we're going to take that amount, we're going to take X% of that, and we're going to give it back to the employees as a bonus. Now, I don't really like the money, our tax dollars going to a bonus of a lot of these people are overpaid to begin with, but it's going to save us a lot. And then their next budget is smaller, and we're going to keep that going until we get them shrinking to where they're actually running on the operational expense of what they actually need. And the problem here, the one struggle to this is it almost has to be different for each agency, because some agencies have these insane budgets that they just throw away so much money just to make sure they spend. And some agencies, they don't have near as much. So let's say an agency has a $50 million budget, and their operation expense, their standard expense, their building and their salaries and everything else that they have to have, let's say it's 30 million, right? So you got 20 million being wasted. So you can't give 1% broke down amongst 11, because you're making these people rich. On the other hand, you look at another agency that utilizes most of its budget in actual expense, because some do. You have to give a higher percentage to that cut to make it worth it. And you will find these employees actually working harder to try to find ways to save money, and we will cut expense. And where I got this model from, this idea from, was there was a town in Michigan that, like the town exec, maybe it's county, we'll just say county. And the county executive said, we're going to cut this expense. we're running these deficits. We need to be not spending beyond our means, just like in our households. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take in all these aspects of the government here, every department, whatever you cut out of your expense, we're going to give X percentage back to you as a bonus. And they cut their spending so dramatically, and they still did all the same work and all the necessities. So it's been applied on a small level, and that's something that can be applied on the grand scale. And that would do a lot of shrinking of the spending, and we got to cut the spending because our debt is just, this is one of the greatest threats. I've said for years that was the greatest threat to America. Now there's another greatest threat, so that's the second greatest. But that's kind of my thought there.
I want to.
I believe that the agency you were speaking about is a combination of a couple of stories, in that there is a December 21st, 1996 audit of the San Joaquin County Housing Authority with purchases of 42 single-family homes, and there was a conflict of interest there. There is also a reference to the federal audit of the Department of Property and Procurement with $9 million of wasted money out of the Virgin Islands from 2000 to 2005. So it sounds like it's not one agency, but several that have done a very similar thing that you're speaking about. It may have been a mix of several stories, but I just wanted to clarify that for the public.
Yeah, I might have actually put two stories there together, but the takeaway
is absolutely correct. Yeah, the point is absolutely correct. It's just want to make sure people understand it's a bigger problem than just that one example.
I have a perfect example of a government body wasting a budget that has happened quite a bit in the last, I'd say 10 years is what I researched today. And I don't know if any of the three of you guys have actually read the reports in the last few days. And if you have, I really hope you were as surprised to it as me. But government bodies wasting funding. Are you aware of, and how do you feel about the fact that the IRS has spent $711,000 in 2022 alone, and over $11 million in the last 10 years on stockpiling of surplus ammunition?
So I spoke about this back in, I think it was 2014, when the Clive and Bundy situation was happening. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that or not.
Yes,
yes, we are.
You have the Bureau of Land Management has snipers and SWAT teams. You know, the post office, and I think it was 2014, bought, I think it was 40,000 MP5s, submachine, 40 caliber submachine guns, and billions of rounds of ammunition. No government agency that is not specifically tasked with law enforcement should be armed. They shouldn't have guns. They shouldn't have ammo. They shouldn't have body armor. They shouldn't have SWAT teams. They shouldn't have snipers. That is a law enforcement thing only. So the militarization of all these agencies is that, again, have nothing to do with law enforcement at all, is ridiculous. And you know what? As an American citizen, that's a scary thought. The post office is militarized, legitimately. This is nonsense. Now, like I've said, I would love to dissolve the FBI and actually the CIA also. And there are a bunch of pedophiles up in there. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about or not, but the continual cover up. Or pedophiles might be the wrong word. Pedophiles, child pornography lovers, whatever, and these are supposed to be smart.
Now, I just want to congratulate you.
It's crazy. But all right.
I just want to congratulate you because you just earned this interview a fact check cover.
Well, the facts have been proven. You have a lot of CIA. There was this thing where they found, and just I don't know the numbers. I read the report where they found a ton of CIA. And granted, that is an insanely large entity with a lot of employees. But the amount of people that are sitting there while they're on their work computers looking up child porn and stuff like that is crazy. I actually first heard about it on Steven Crowder. So I'm like, I got to go search this. But I know if he says it, it's right. That guy does so much research, and he has to because the left hates him so much. But I actually went and found reports on his website, went and checked those. Then I did some research on my own and found that this actually is true. And that's nuts. And then no charges. Like, if that was us, they'd have busted through our door, with a battering ram and thrown us to the ground and hauled us off.
Well, we've seen firsthand with Hunter Biden how
Yeah.
political fame makes you exempt from specific types of charges.
We
We
really
can go ahead
do
and
have-
move on.
Yeah, we do have a two-tier for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that was Mike Marshall's question. So Mike Vasquez. Well, first of all, Brandon, how much longer do you want to go? We planned an hour, and we're rolling on an hour and 40 minutes. So I don't want to take away from your family time.
We're gonna do 13 more minutes, and then I'm gonna have to go. So get your best, most juicy questions, and I'll be as fast as I can at answering them. And hey, you know what? If we want to get together again another day and finish it up, because I love answering questions. It's what I love most about campaigning. I do an event. I never end it until every question's answered.
10-4. Well, I will allow Mr. Vasquez and Mr. Marshall to hit you with another question each, and then that should probably wrap up our time. So go ahead, Mr. Vasquez.
Okay. For clarification, it's 2014. It seems it was reported that the USPS was buying ammunition and firearms after Senator Rand Paul tried to remove the gun ban at that time. And that was quick look. Doesn't seem to have been confirmed or denied. So I'm not sure about that, but just for people who want to look that up. I have an easy question. Well, I think it's an easy question. Because on your website, and again, that is the Brandon for Missouri, the number 4, you had stated that you wanted to end property taxes. And what I wanted to understand is property taxes at the state, local, state, and federal level. Now, property taxes is something that is used by many states, even the federal government, to supplement the tax revenue and provides funding for, well, it depends on who you ask what it actually provides funding for. But one of the things may be Social Security. If we are to remove the property taxes you have suggested, what would place that funding that goes into various entitlement programs that people have paid into?
Okay, so I actually thought you were going to go another route. I thought you were going to say, that's a state thing, and you're running for federal. So I was going to make my debate about that.
No, it has applications in place.
But anyways, we don't replace it. We cut the spending. We get responsible, just like we're required to do in our homes. All right. Otherwise, it's just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger. That we went from the $2 trillion budget to the $4 trillion budget being the standard. Now we're going to be at the $6 trillion budget being the standard, and it's the same on the state level. I mean, in Missouri, we're $50 billion budget. Half of it is subsidized by the federal government. We need to cut these spending, cut these costs. There's a lot of states that don't have personal property tax. Personal property tax, I argue, is unconstitutional. I understand that in the states they have laws that have made it legal. So, that it's okay for them to collect taxes for these reasons and specifically. Now, here's one thing I say is actually a responsibility to the federal government. If a state is violating your constitutional rights and it's being allowed, I think it is the federal government's job to step in and protect those rights. I believe that personal property taxes are a violation of your 4th and your 5th Amendment right. All right? And I can make that argument. And anyone, I've gotten a debate with a state senator about this, and he said that I was wrong. I didn't know what I was talking about, and then we got into a debate, and he conceded at the end. Because I can make that debate, and I can make it really easy. But I want more. I want to have time for more questions. So we'll debate. I'll go to that later.
No, that's a fair answer, and I understand. So your answer would be remove that, lower, if I'm understanding you correctly, lower spending, remove the tax, and it's not something that is authorized because it is a violation of the 4th and 5th Amendments in your understanding. Is that a correct summarization?
It is. But if it needed to be subsidized, you could go to a use tax, an additional tax, sales tax, based on use. And I'm not a big fan of. I want to lower taxes across the board. But if it has to be recovered, that's a way to do it. You don't punish the people that have done well in life and built property and real estate and stuff, because that is a tax that more so people who are middle class feel the most. It's not lower class because most of them don't actually end up having property taxes, or what they do have is so minimal. It's people like me where I'm a middle class American where I got to pay a $2,200 real estate tax on my house, and I got to pay because I do drive in a truck. You got to pay $1,400 a year just in personal property tax on my truck, and then another 1,000 on my wife's SUV, and then another, whatever on my four-wheeler. It's just insane, and it's ridiculous, and it's a violation of your property rights.
I understand. Yeah, thank you for that answer. Thank you. Mike.
Okay, now it's my turn. So I'm going to go back to the unconstitutional agencies. I do appreciate your answer on that earlier. There was a bill introduced into the Senate. I'm not sure what year it was introduced, and I can't even honestly tell you what the bill number was. But it was a bill that was going to require any new regulations that were put forth by any agency that were going to cost the government in excess of $100,000 to actually be put in front of the Congress under an expedited bill for congressional approval of that new legislation. This is one way that you can actually curtail some of the agencies acting outside of their authority. But another thing that would happen is it would actually require the representatives would be accountable to their constituents in the matter of how they supported the position that they took on whatever new regulation. Is this something that you would be in support of?
100%. But I go further. I'd say not only if they're proposing anything over $100,000, I might go to a smaller number, but I'd have to evaluate that with experts because I don't know what your average bill, just the cost involved with bringing it up, or your average regulation is. But I would support it, but I would add to it and say, I want to thin out the books. So like I have a write up on the what I've dubbed the American Abrogation Act. So we have a lot of redundant laws and regulations that overlap, and all of them create an expense. And when one overlaps another, that overlap, it doesn't mean that part isn't going to create an expense. It does. So I feel this not only with legislation, but when it comes to bureaucracies bringing forward policies and regulations that they need to abrogate. So when it comes forward, not only does if it goes over 100,000, does it have to go to Congress to vote on, but if it spends over 100,000, they also have to repeal 2 prior regulations. What that'll do is it'll consolidate. They'll start finding redundant regulations, and every regulation creates a cost. So they'll find redundant regulations and start repealing them, bring them up as the repealed ones. And it'll make them bring forward more coherent legislation as far as politicians go, and more coherent regulation as far as agencies go.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. And I do agree with that stance. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Michael and Zach.
Well, I think that's for the time that we've had, and I think there's been an incredible amount of details that you've gone over. I thank you for the answers, and you've been very forthright. I think that's important, and I thank you for that. I do thank you for the time you've given us, and I apologize to your wife and your child that taking you away for so long, but I do appreciate the time that you have given us for these answers.
I appreciate you guys coming with me. I wish in the beginning I would have shortened my answers up a little bit, but I figured talking to guys like you would get a little more in depth. But we could have had more questions. So before we go, I want to ask you, Mike, because I was told I didn't watch Wesley's interview because I didn't want to know what to expect. I was told that you really came out with some tough ones that threw him off, and that actually, I told Zach, I said, I love questions. It's where you can really showcase the years you've put forward to learn. And I'm as a truck driver, people always think I'm some dumb truck driver, not qualified, blah blah. And then we get out and start talking, and it usually blows people away, and they're like, "Wow, like I want to vote for you. Can I donate to you?" And so I love it. But then hearing that tough, that you threw out some tough ones that really threw Wesley through some hoops. I was like, I rarely get that. I'm normally talking to regular people, crowd of people asking questions, so. You tend to get a lot of the same questions over and over as you go around, and really, it's really rare to get the outlier ones. And I've experienced some of those tonight. But before we go, I want to do one more thing. I want to ask you, Mike.
Yeah.
As you got one more for me to throw at me? Tough one.
Oh,
I'll take. They are anything. Whether it's
Trust
tough.
me, I can give you lots of them. But specifically, give me 2 seconds here. Okay, yeah. So let's go off of your website again, talking about immigration. Now, one of the things that, yeah, we hadn't touched on that yet, so let's go a little bit into that. You're looking at ending sanctuary cities, and you've mentioned that you also support and are a strong defender of the 10th Amendment. Now, very much so, it is possible in some cases, such as in New York State or California, where they have declared themselves a sanctuary state, as well as having sanctuary cities that are defended by that. How do you coincide the difficulty of the 10th Amendment right of those states and the sanctuary status that they have provided?
So this is a tough one because as a constitutional originalist, but my argument there would be, I guess I would have to start with what do I think that the job of the federal government is. At this event, I do a lot of events. Like I think we had 4 last week, 5 the week before. Like we do a lot. And I was at this event, and someone asked me, and there's actually a question that's never been asked, which is surprising because it's one that I've asked people multiple times. What would you say the role of the federal government in the simplest terms possible? And I thought about it for a second. I came back and I said, protecting my life, liberty, property, and my constitutional rights. And that's not my full explanation or belief. That's just the simplest terms possible. I also believe it's up to the federal government to protect our country. And to protect our sovereignty, you can't be a sovereign nation if you don't control your borders. We have federal laws with immigration, and they're there for a very important reason. The unfettered migration, in a natural form, it may not be a bad thing because when work is needed, labor comes. When it's no longer needed, labor leaves. The problem is we've created this welfare state in our nation to where when it's no longer needed, it don't matter. We're going to take care of you. Or when you fail, it doesn't matter. We're going to take care of you. It was something like 90% of immigrants 100 years ago when they come, it was something like 9 out of 10, 90% would fail and they go back to their countries. Well, now when they come, whether legal or illegal, it doesn't matter. The government's going to take care of you. So I look at the damage it does whenever you just allow these sanctuary cities, you allow these illegal immigrants to be in your state, and you don't turn them over to ICE or feds. You release them out the back door of the jail after they're arrested or caught. So it's a tough one, but because my belief is that it is up to the government, the federal government, is their core responsibilities to take care of, to protect my life, liberty, my property, my constitutional rights, also to maintain the sovereignty of our nation, which would require them to control our borders and who comes in and out. I feel that it is within the federal government's power to sit there and say, because there is federal law on immigration, that we do not have open borders, where we're not supposed to, not on paper, that it is the federal government's responsibility to make sure these people who are not supposed to be here are not. So if you declare sanctuary city status, well, I think all federal funding to states and cities should be cut completely. But like I established earlier, that's not going to happen with the schools. It's not going to happen on any level, all out. But if you're going to be a sanctuary city, then you get no federal funding at all. Figure it out yourself. Or my tax dollars shouldn't be going towards an illegal. And my tax dollars and your tax dollars and your tax dollars and your tax dollars absolutely pays for illegals. And they're with things they get in other states. So that's why I think it is constitutional. And why I do think that it is the duty of our government. Because I am being damaged. My property is being stolen. And by that, I mean the money I earned, that is my property. It's being taken from me and sent to California, to a sanctuary city, to pay for those illegals. So that's where I might make that argument. And I've never got that question before, so that was a good one.
Yeah.
Mike asked the question, but I want to ask a follow-up question before you go.
Then I have follow-up if we have time.
Okay.
You
We have time.
Go ahead.
The immigration.
It's so hard to walk away from these kind of conversations. It's so good.
The immigration, hot topic issue. You and I have already had this conversation off camera about strategical placement of immigrants and refugees. All right. How do you feel about states like New York in California that are passing legislation to allow non-citizen residents vote. 883,000 non-citizen immigrants in New York that are going to be allowed to vote on the state level.
New York City, yes.
New York City.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
I can be a little extreme on some issues. And I personally feel that if you are not a natural born citizen, you should not be able to vote on, well, anything. So if you have been naturalized, you've got your citizenship, I actually still don't believe you should be able to vote. So I have a really big problem with that.
Why do you feel? Okay, so it's a common argument. There's a lot of immigrants. We all know people that are immigrated citizens that have gotten their citizenship. So why do you feel that they shouldn't be able to vote after they have been granted citizenship and they have been granted the rights to all the other Bill of Rights?
So it's a tough one. I've been back and forth on this, but what I look at is where we're at in our nation, that we are very close to losing it. And one of the biggest problems with immigration that have fed into us getting to this point is that back in the day, it was the melting pot. You came in and you assimilated. Now the problem is they come and they don't assimilate, and they want to attack our values, our national values, our Judeo-Christian values, the values that this nation was founded on. They want to attack our traditions. They demand that we respect theirs while they trash on ours. And that's become a problem. It's created this division, and it's become really bad. Go to Dearborn, Michigan. I've actually been there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might get away with going there, Zach. You got the full beard going on and everything. But it's a big problem. Out of my vehicle, I would get the crap kicked out of me.
Go ahead.
That is a great example of non-assimilation. And the thing is, it's happening more and more. You get these immigrants of, let's use Islam as an example, because Dearborn's the one I've talked, where they move and they flock to one area. And once they're, it was whenever they started moving into Dearborn, if you go back and you research it, you'll see they weren't violent, they weren't aggressive, but once they had the power there, that's when it changed, like someone flipped a switch, because they were now the majority. And so you get this Islamic population moving to the city, and this might be a little bit of an exaggeration, extreme to say it's like the Middle East, because it's not. But you go around, you see the traditions of their nation, their failed nation that they left and came here for a reason, but then they want to try to turn our country into their country. Well, you didn't come to plug-in Muslim country here. You came to America. You need to assimilate. And back in the day, assimilation was a natural thing, and it happened with everyone. Now that's not the case. You get people coming in, they want to tear down our Constitution because that doesn't match their beliefs from their country. Islam is a perfect example of that. And Islam is also not constitutionally compliant. Just saying.
It is a very big problem. And a lot of people that I have spoken to from the start of the process of founding National Firearms Coalition, and even as we grow, it's kind of a hot topic issue. And you guys can all feel free to correct me if I'm horribly wrong about this, but to my knowledge, we're the only significant nation in the world that takes all this pride in the multiculturalism and the multilingual and the multi-religion, without actually requiring people to have respect for our nation's beliefs. And when I say that, go ahead, Mike.
I would disagree with that. Looking at the United Kingdom, there is, especially in several areas throughout London and the southern English region, looking at France with the Moroccans, looking at Germany with the influx of individuals from the Middle East. That's not completely correct. They have a different form of what we're doing here. We may be a little more free with the degree and the manner in which people are not assimilating. but those nations do have requirements, especially with the open border plan of the European Union. So I did want to make that correction. From what you're
No, and I appreciate it because it's a topic that I haven't done a lot of research on, and the reason that I made that statement is because an older gentleman from NFC actually sent me a message the other day of a sign at a Russian border that has a great big old picture of Vladimir Putin's smiling face, that says "Welcome to Russia. Learn how to eat Russian, speak Russian, pay Russian taxes, and blah blah blah." And he made the comment to me that most other nations expect you to assimilate to their beliefs and their fundamentals. And then I look at our country, and we've removed a lot of fundamental things from our education system, a lot of religious beliefs from our education system. We don't, we talked about this the other night, and I won't really ramble on about it, but I feel like we've removed assimilating from immigration. Like, we allow them to just come here and live how they want and believe who they want, and then we end up with these situations where the public school, where 40 immigrants just came to, all of a sudden it's a problem that they have God in their school because it's against their religion, and it becomes a giant rigmarole in that local community until it creates a trickle effect all the way across the nation. You know what I mean?
Well, that's generally a first world experience. Second world nations, third world nations do not have that same attitude towards it. So that's why I said EU, United States, United Kingdom. But I know Mike wanted to ask a question, and I do see your comment there, Will. And I think
I wanted to answer that one. Before we go over to you, Mike, and I'm sorry, I hope you don't mind waiting another moment.
Absolutely.
I would like to say two things. I want to address what Will said, but before I do, I want to come back to where I said, about illegal, if I had my way, not illegal, but legal immigrants who get citizenship shouldn't be allowed to vote. This is part of the art of the deal. Because maybe what we compromise with is they got to be here 10 years. And at that point, they have probably adopted some of our customs and traditions. Maybe they haven't. But further, now this one is there's one no compromise to me, is I actually think that no one should be able to serve in public office who is not born here, period. That's how we get people like Ilhan Omar, who, if she had her way, if she was the decision maker, she would tear this nation apart. Now, Will, here's what I'd have to say to you. How long so everyone knows what he said. How long will this guy remain on the right team before being compromised? I can't be compromised. I truly can't. Here's why. We see politicians on the top level. Most of them came up upper middle class or lower upper class. And they get there and they look out for their friends, their families, the people that funded their campaigns, the PACs, the corporations, the rich donors, and themselves. I joke around and I would say, well, I'm going to do what they do. It's just, if you look at who those people are to me, they're lower middle class Americans. All my family, all my friends, all lower middle class Americans. I would never go turn my back on them. But you also have to come into the beginning of what I said when I was being passionate about, I'm fighting for my nation. I don't care if I piss people off. I want my son to be free. I want my nephews and nieces to be free. I want your kids to be free, right? And we're at a point where if people don't stand up and fight, they are not going to. I cannot be compromised. I cannot be bought, and I will never betray what I say because there will not be an opportunity for the next generation to take back. If I want that to happen, I have to stick to what I say and be ready to fight for it. And I am, because I want my son to be free. And I'm very fearful right now that he won't be. And I would never betray my son's future to line my pockets with anything or whatever deal. I give you guys my word. Everyone watching this right now and everyone on here with me, everything I say, I mean. And the people who have rallied behind me, that's why they've rallied behind me, because they do believe that, because I've spoken depth. I have a town hall. I did these digital town halls in 2020 because you can do a real one. And they were all scheduled to be 1 hour. The shortest any of them was, if I recall correctly, was about 1 hour and 55 minutes, because I will not stop one as long as there's questions to be asked. And through the 10,000 plus roughly questions I was asked in 2020, I never deviated, I never pandered, and my answers always stayed the same when a question was asked. And those are the same values that I'm going to take to DC, and those are the same answers I'm going to have when I'm in DC, and those are the results you're going to see from me in DC. I may not be able to fix the problems, but I will fight to fix them, and I won't give up, because America is the greatest nation in the world. And if we lose this, the areas that are supposedly free, I established this earlier, that we're the only free nation. We're the only one with free speech, right to bear arms. If this country falls, these other places that are supposedly free are going to get a whole lot less free, right? We're kind of like where people talk about, and they use that example, whether you're agree with it or not, the example of unions. That the unions are what hold the wages and the work environment up for everywhere non-union. All right. Well, I actually don't believe that, and there's tons of places where that's been disproven. But I think that's applicable on the world stage, as America being truly free is what keeps these other places semi-free. If we fail here, our kids have nowhere to go. I will never betray what I say. I will never betray my citizens, my constituents, my neighbors, my friends, my coworkers, my family, my son. So I will always be on the right side. Mike,
All right,
I love you.
Marco.
Thanks for waiting it out.
Not a problem. Not a problem. And that is something that needs to be addressed. Okay. So I am going to bounce back to immigration.
Okay.
Something that I failed to mention in the beginning in my introduction. As you know, I'm a constitutionalist. In order to be a constitutionalist, you have to be a historian. When did the United States the federal government first start regulating immigration?
I want to say that people think it's actually in the early 1900s, but it was actually in the mid 1800s.
No,
but
they first started in the early 1900s. 1917 is the first broad regulation of immigration at the federal level. Now, the Constitution states in Section 8, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. In other words, what the requirements to become a citizen are. It actually does not say anything about immigration. Okay. Prior to 1917, all immigration was controlled by the states. The states decided who they wanted to allow in and who they didn't want to allow to their states. Okay. However, the federal government decided what was the requirements in order to become a citizen of the United States. Okay. So now, knowing that, does that have any impact on your position?
as
Because
far as my
again,
position of
we've
federal
got
immigration, like core cities and stuff, what I said.
What was that?
When you said, does that change my opinion? You're talking as far as when I was responding to sanctuary cities and
Yes.
enforcing our immigration in our country. No, it doesn't change my opinion. I think it absolutely is our federal government's problem. See, here's something else, okay? And this also plays into it. If you do allow the states, you're gonna have states like California and New York, and some of these liberal states are just gonna let every immigrant come in possible, okay? And there's these think tanks that have come up, and I could probably find the studies I did that say something along the lines of, if we were to get 4 million people in 1 year, would collapse into our nation in 1 year, 4 million would collapse our economy completely. So, and the thing is, if we let states choose, California would probably take 4 million by itself in the first year. And now our country's collapsed economically.
Okay. So I want to circle back on this a little bit more. Okay. Being as the federal government doesn't have any authority over actual immigration constitutionally. Okay. And I'm going to have you try to justify it constitutionally here after. The federal government also does not have any authority in order to put funding towards any immigrant program either.
Per the Constitution.
Right. So, as a result, the federal government has no authority to either choose who is allowed into the country. They have the authority to decide, make rules on who is allowed to become a United States citizen, but they don't have any constitutional authority to say who's allowed in. Secondly, they have no authority to create special programs for immigration, i.e., immigrants shouldn't be allowed federal aid, welfare, which that's whole nother line. Federal government doesn't have authority to do that anyway, but that's not. So that being said, okay, if California wants to allow 10 million immigrants into their state, then that's California's problem. That's California's problem as far as the costs, everything along those lines. Same with New York State, same with any other states that decide that they want to become quote unquote sanctuary states. It is their burden to pay those costs. It's not the federal government.
So, yes, but here's the problem. Well, there's a couple problems with that. First, if they were to allow 1 million in, the problem is this, that though the federal government doesn't have constitutional authority to pay for these programs, they're going to, and that's going to hurt me and you and everyone else, okay? Because that's our tax dollars, right? They're going to take money that's supposed to be for something else, give it to that, and then they're going to tax us more. The other problem here with this is that let's say we take the federal government out of it completely. They're not funding it at all, right? So now it is fully California's problem. The problem is it's not, because what's going to happen? Now you're going to have all these legal immigrants, illegal, however you want to put it, in California. But the thing is, they're not going to stay in California. Some will. Some are going to flood across into the bordering states. Some into Nevada and over in Arizona and up into Oregon and into Washington. So it's not just California is the one dealing with it, because we don't have borders around every state to prevent that from happening. If we actually had the ability to restrict and control who comes into our state, essentially, then you could in my opinion, you could probably then make an argument for that. The problem is, though, the reality of things is these illegals that flood into California and stuff, they do tend to sweep across the nation. Here in the heartland of our country in Missouri, surprisingly, immigration is always the number 2 or number 3 issue when polling takes place. In my district, and Wesley's district is number 2 issue. In my district, this is the number 3. Wesley specifically because they keep busing all these illegals up in his district and dropping them. So like you're starting to have these areas that are just concentrated with illegals that are, committing crimes, and not all of them, but you're starting to see crime spikes in these areas. And then what happens whenever there's none of they start to spread elsewhere. So, and that's what happens when they come in, up through San Jose and into California. Some go up and they don't leave the state because they know I'm safe. Some will start crossing over to the other states and moving across. Before you know it, they're in my state, creating a problem for me.
Well, again, that is on the states to regulate who they allow in and who they don't.
But the question is how, I get that. But the question is, how can my state regulate who comes in unless we put a fence around my entire border?
You don't need to put a fence.
So how do we regulate who can come in? Because they're going to come in.
If they come in and they don't have authorization, they are not a natural citizen of the United States, which does not grant them the right of free travel. Then you arrest them and you deport them.
But then you have to catch them. Look at how many areas actually strongly do enforce the laws and catch them. But it's a small percent. Most are getting through, and the ones that are getting through are creating problems in society. Not necessarily saying they're criminals,
because too many states are relying on the federal government to take on that burden. Federal government can't do it. States can.
So again, at the end of the day, it comes down to the immense problem of our federal government. They, like I said, tear it down, put it all back to the states. If that happened, then I could see the argument being made to actually justify allowing that. The problem is we're in a state where the federal government is vastly overreaching and just, I call it hyperbolic, but they're tyrannical, and everything they do, 99.9% of what they do is unconstitutional. They never had the right to do. So you can't, I would say you can't take the path of saying, well, constitutionally or whatever, that California has a right and the federal government doesn't have a right to fund. You can't say though that it's okay for them to go into California because the federal government doesn't have the right to fund it and subsidize while they're doing it. You have to fix that problem first. It's kind of like with all the subsidies for illegals coming to the country. It's like they don't have incentive to leave because they get all these handouts. Same with people who come here as immigrants on work visas or whatever, who lose their jobs and they don't want to get to, have to leave or whatever, so they just disappear in the system, and somehow they're able to get these subsidies and food stamps and other stuff. The problem is you have to look at the symptoms, I guess you could say, to really say what the problem is. And the problem is, if you're allowing these people in, the federal government is funding them, whether it's constitutional or not, and it's definitely not. You can't say it's all right for them to come in as long as this is happening. If this stops, and the federal government stops, now we can look at this is California's problem, and every state can handle it in their own way. But until we get to the point where we have reined in the federal government, I don't think it's an option at all, especially with election stuff. California, you go and get it. Illegals are allowed to get driver's license. You know what happens when you go into a DMV in California and get a driver's license? You're automatically registered to vote. Now you're going and voting.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
it's a very complex problem, and there is, in my opinion, there is no solution right now. And the only way we can get to a solution is if we rein in the federal government first. Then we can start looking at things. Because if your bathtub's overflowing, do you grab a mop? And if your bathtub's overflowing, do you grab a mop and start mopping it up before you turn on the water, or turn off the water before you reach out and pull the plug to let the water start to drain? No, you don't grab the mop to start trying to clean up the problem. You stop the cause of the problem and then you clean it up. And the cause of the problem is the federal government.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I was trying to allude at, okay, is the federal government has already overstepped its bounds on immigration. And the result of the federal government overstepping its bounds is the positions that we find ourselves in today.
Yeah. I'm sorry, was there a question there? I was reading this comment that was just penned. And if there was a question I missed, I was listening to you, but I missed the...
No, he was agreeing with you.
To recognize that the position that we find ourselves in today is because the federal government has already overreached in trying to regulate immigration. And the result from them trying to regulate immigration and the fact that we have parties going back and forth on, well, this term we're not allowing immigrations, this term we're allowing immigrants, next term we're not allowing them. We've gone back and forth and so forth when this is a state rights issue. The fact is, with federal government overreach on immigration, it has actually put us in the position we find ourselves in today. And that's what I wanted to get you to acknowledge.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've spoken on it before, and I think touched on that a bit on here with them before you came on. We need to tear down the federal government. They're the cause of most of our problems. And like I said before, I think you weren't on yet when I said you want to see failure, you want something to get worse, inject federal government into it. Anything federal government is injected to gets worse, the costs get higher, the results or the product gets astronomically worse.
Before we wrap things up here.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is about when I gotta go. We're about 2.5 hours in when I said we do about an hour 15 or something like that. But it's
before we wrap it up, because I know your relationship with Wesley. Everybody watching right now, Wesley Smith has a comment up on the bottom of the page. He's running for Congressional District 2 in the state of Missouri as well. But I'd like to go back to his comment real quick. And this goes back to the very beginning of our discussion of immigrants when you made the statement that you do not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you made the statement that you do not support immigrants voting, even period at all, correct?
Yes. At this
okay,
point,
so Wesley brought up a very good point, and I'm going to put the comment up on the page. I have met immigrants who have fought for our nation when our natural citizens have not, especially those in predominantly Muslim countries. There are many in our armed forces who get their citizenship from joining. It would be an egregious injustice to deny them voting.
Well, I would be completely fine with that, saying if an immigrant comes in and they serve our nation, when you serve our nation, you have given far more than everyone else. We're just citizens. We're just civilians. They have become a citizen at that point when they're willing to put their life on the line. I could completely 100% support that. My problem is these people that come in and hate America, and those people would never serve.
Okay.
That's what
I just wanted to clear that up.
protect you.
I wanted to clear that up. I didn't want to make it another question. It was just something that he commented based off of this discussion. And it was actually a very valid point. Because I do personally know immigrants that have fought in wars and served our country. So I don't think I would ever begin to think that I'd try to strip them of their rights that they earned by putting their life down for this country.
Absolutely.
On that note, if nobody else has anything else to say, I'm going to go ahead.
We'll have to do this again.
I would love to. This has been so enjoyable. I could do this for hours. We just did it for hours.
As we
I
all
love these kind of conversations.
everybody on the stream, everybody that watches this post stream later tomorrow, whatever, make sure that you guys are checking out Brandon Wilkinson, running for Congressional District 3 in the state of Missouri. Very patriotic, pro-2A, pro-life, and conservative. Make sure you check out No Soundbites Allowed, Michael Vasquez, and Liberty First Foundation with Michael Marshall, as well as National Firearms Coalition. Had a really good time doing this interview and look forward to doing more in the future. I thank you for your time that went way past what we originally planned. And I wish you good luck in continuing your campaign, and I look forward to our next time on camera together.
I do also, before we go, I'd like to make a plug real quick. My website, as Vaz said many times, Brandon4Missouri.com. You can use the number 4 or FOR. I own both domains. Brandon4Missouri.com. If you like what I stand for, I'm a regular guy challenging a career politician incumbent running for his 8th term. I put a lot of my own money on the line and perfectly fine doing it. This fight needs to be fought. I'm someone who was able to afford to be able to do that. Not rich, but a lot of money. So I do need your help at grassroots or what I rely on. I don't have any rich donors or PACs that support me. So if you like what I stand for, you want to help me, you want to see someone like me who's going to go and fight for you, not bullshit you, but fight for you. I'm your guy. And even if you're not in my district, my vote in DC impacts the entire nation. So if you like what I stand for, consider making a donation, 5, 10, 20, maybe even $50. You can go to my page at the top, click sign up, or you can go to my website, Brandon4Missouri.com. Every dollar truly counts. So I appreciate the support, guys. And to Michael, Bass, and Zach, it's been a great time. We should definitely do this again. It's been incredibly enjoyable.
Thank you. You guys have a great night.
Thanks
All
for
right,
your
take care,
time,
guys.
Brandon.
All right.
Yep.
Bye-bye.